I heard a chainsaw scream behind my house and my stomach just dropped because it wasn't coming from the street, it was coming from my backyard. By the time I got through the gate, the HOA president was standing on my property like she owned the place, and my 100-year-old oak was already halfway ruined. 10 minutes later, that same oak went down the wrong way and slammed into her roof sirens, neighbors' flashing lights, and her authority evaporated in real time. My name's Mark Dawson, and I'm the kind of guy who likes quiet weekends, clean paperwork, and not knowing my neighbors' middle names. So when I bought my place in Cedar Grove, Ohio, I paid extra to make sure my house was not part of the homeowners association. No meetings, no surprise rules, no community standards weaponized by whoever had the loudest voice. The best thing about the house was the backyard, big enough to breathe old fence line and a massive oak that had clearly been there longer than most of the people on the block. It wasn't some cute decorative tree either. It held the slope in place and shaded half the yard like a natural umbrella. Then Linda Parker became president of the HOA. If you've ever met the clipboard and consequences type, you already know the vibe. Perfect hair, perfect smile, and a tone that makes good morning sound like a warning. At first I barely noticed her. I figured not my circus, not my HOA. Then the first letter showed up in my mailbox like it had been hand-delivered by a grudge. Notice of violation. My hazardous tree needed to be removed immediately to protect community safety and property values with a deadline stamped in bold, like I was late on child support. I read it twice, then checked the address line like maybe they'd meant the other Mark Dawson, the unlucky one who actually lived under their rules. I walked straight over to Linda's house the next afternoon, letter in hand. She didn't invite me in. She didn't have to because she met me on her porch like she'd been waiting for the scene. I told her calmly, "My property isn't in the homeowners association." Linda didn't blink. She just smiled and said, "Everyone has to follow the rules, Mark." And the way she said my name, slow, familiar, like we were already in a feud. I went home and pulled out my closing documents. I highlighted the section that showed my lot was excluded, scanned it, emailed it, and even printed a copy because I could feel this turning into one of those things. Then I added the city ordinance about protected trees and erosion control because that oak wasn't just old, it mattered to the land. 2 days later, I got another letter. Different wording, same message, cut it down, or face penalties. A week after that, another one, and another. Linda started showing up by my fence line phone held high, taking pictures like she was collecting evidence for a crime show. One morning I heard her say, loud enough for me to catch it through the kitchen window, "Property values suffer when people don't cooperate." I stepped outside and said, "Linda, you don't have jurisdiction here." She turned, still holding her phone, and hit me with that tight smile. "Safety is subjective," she said, like she was dropping a legal mic. Then she walked off like she'd won something. That's when the anger stopped being abstract. It wasn't about a tree anymore. It was about someone deciding that a title and a Facebook group meant she could bully whoever she wanted. And yeah, I know how that sounds, but it's hard not to take it personally when the harassment is literally arriving at your mailbox. I tried to keep it boring. I sent certified letters. I emailed the HOA board politely asking why they were sending enforcement notices to a home that wasn't in their association. No one answered directly. It was all vague, "We'll review," and "the president is acting in the community's best interest," and "thank you for your cooperation," which is basically corporate for "we're going to keep doing this until you get tired." And I did get tired. There was a night around midnight where I sat at my kitchen table with a stack of letters and my laptop open to a dozen tabs. I remember thinking, real plain and practical, maybe it's cheaper to just remove the tree and move on. Not because I was convinced Linda was right, because I could feel the stress leaking into everything. Work, sleep, even stupid stuff like taking the trash out. When your home starts feeling like a place you're defending instead of living in, it messes with you. But then I looked out the window at that oak, and I thought about what giving in would actually teach Linda. It would tell her she could trespass into anyone's life if she pushed long enough. So I stopped thinking like a guy trying to keep the peace and started thinking like a guy building a case. I installed cameras facing the back gate and the tree line. I saved every email, every letter, every screenshot. I called city code enforcement and asked bluntly what it took to remove a large tree like that. The woman on the phone, Ms. Jenkins, didn't even hesitate. She explained permits, inspections, the whole process, and the consequences if someone cut a protected tree without approval. Then she said something that stuck with me. If it's on your property, no one else gets to decide that, not without your permission. I also talked to my neighbor Tom Thompson, an older guy who'd worked with trees for decades. He walked my yard with his hands in his pockets, looked up at the oak and said, "That's not a hazard, that's an asset." Then he added, "But if somebody cuts it wrong, it'll go wherever it wants." A few days later, Linda cornered me at the end of my driveway. This time she wasn't smiling. She stepped closer than she needed to and said, "I'll make an example out of you." I stared at her, waiting for the punchline. She didn't have one. She just turned and walked back to her car like she'd said something completely normal. That's when I knew this wasn't paperwork anymore. This was personal to her, which meant she wasn't going to stop at letters. The next Thursday, I came home from work and saw 2 trucks parked behind my fence. Not on the street behind it. My gate was open. I didn't even fully process it at first. My brain tried to file it under contractor mistake or wrong house. Then I heard it chainsaw revving up loud and hungry. I ran through the yard, and there they were. 3 guys in work gear, one already cutting into the base of my oak like it was a normal Tuesday job, and standing a few feet back wearing a hard hat that looked fresh out of the packaging was Linda Parker. I shouted, "Stop! That's my property!" One of the workers hesitated, blade still whining, and glanced at Linda like she was his boss. Linda didn't look at him. She looked at me dead calm and said, "Authorized work. You're interfering." I pulled out my phone and hit 911 with my thumb shaking so hard I almost missed the button. "Someone is trespassing," I said. "They're cutting a tree on my property. I need police and city code enforcement here now." Linda rolled her eyes, actually rolled them, and snapped at the crew. "Keep going." That one sentence told me everything about her, not just controlling, reckless. The cut got deeper. Wood cracked in a way that didn't sound like nature. It sounded like a warning. Tom was right. The moment you mess up the angle, you're not in charge anymore. Someone yelled, "It's going the wrong way." And in this weird frozen second, I watched Linda's face change, like she suddenly realized consequences aren't just something you mail to other people. The oak shifted, then committed. It didn't fall toward the open yard like it should have. It swung hard like gravity had a grudge too and came down toward Linda's house. The impact was thunder. Shingles and dust exploded up, and for a second you couldn't see anything but a dirty cloud rolling over the roofline. People screamed. Someone started crying, and I heard myself say out loud, "Oh my God, oh my God." Police arrived fast, then fire and city inspectors. They separated everyone like it was a crime scene because honestly it was. Linda kept trying to talk over them, still in that "I'm in charge" mode, until an officer cut her off and asked, "Ma'am, did you authorize this work?" And here's the thing, my whole body wanted to explode with anger. But I didn't need to yell anymore. I just opened my phone and started showing them everything. The certified letters, the emails, the closing documents proving I wasn't in the HOA, the city ordinance notes, and the camera footage Linda standing on my property giving the order to keep cutting. The workers admitted they didn't pull permits. City code enforcement looked like they wanted to scream into the sun. And Linda finally ran out of lines. In the weeks that followed, it moved the way real consequences move: slow, official, unavoidable. Lawyers' statements, hearings. Linda was removed from her position in the Homeowners Association, and the board suddenly acted like they'd never heard of her. Then the civil case hit, and the numbers got ugly. Insurance didn't want to touch it because it wasn't an accident. It was unauthorized work on someone else's property. Her house was declared unsafe to live in, and the rest was exactly what she'd tried to threaten me with. I saw Linda one last time outside a meeting room looking smaller without the clipboard. She didn't say a word. She just stared straight ahead, like if she didn't acknowledge me, reality might negotiate. It didn't, and neither did I. Lesson paperwork beats power trips every time.